Recently, Warlord Games released what we've been calling the Little Bolt Action Starter Set, which is quite good, especially for players who haven't played a wargame before. But it comes with one models that a few people are struggling with building, and that includes some of the more veteran wargamers. I always like to help folks out with models they aren't familiar with, and in this case the difficulty really does come from the material it's made from, not with any complexity of the model itself. Most models we make in this hobby are plastic, polystyrene, with resin and metal also fairly common, but in this case the set includes a pre-coloured cardboard model, and here it is. It is an ED-SKaR Z251 German half-track, a pretty useful armoured transport for bolt action. It comes still in its card sheet, which it is cut from, similar to a plastic sprue. And our first step is to separate the model pieces from the cardboard sprue. And as a comparison to plastic model pieces, you could tear a plastic model from the sprue, but you're left with a nasty gouged or torn area. And we all know that it's better to carefully clip a piece away and shave down the sprue gate. Similarly with the card model, pressing the part out can damage it and leave a nasty frayed edge. So I'm going to be taking a sharp knife and gently running through the connection points between the model and the cardboard sprue. These should be easy to spot, but if you gently wiggle the model, you'll see wherever it's sticking, that's where you want to slice. The model comes as 3 pieces. The main body, which is pre-painted, or I guess printed is probably the correct term, and the 2 stand pieces. In my case, the stands don't actually fit particularly tightly, but we'll deal with that in a moment. Before I go any further, I really want to clean up the mold lines or the mold line equivalents on this piece. With the plastic kit, we would scrape a knife or a bird metal piece over the mold line to scrape it away, but that will actually damage card in a model kit like this. Instead, I'm going to paint the edge with an airbrush primer. You don't need specifically the same stuff that I'm using, but as this is a polyurethane primer, it's going to soak into the card and polymerize and form a nice durable edge. And there was this little trend a while back where everyone bought airbrush primer, and then everyone realized that airbrush priming is rubbish because polyurethane is not great on plastic model pieces, or especially resin and metal models, but it is excellent on card because it soaks in and firms up that edge. And with that dry, I'll set about attaching the stands, and conveniently, for me, there are some loose pieces from the cardboard sprue that I can use. Imagine these card pieces as the equivalent of sprue goo. We are reclaiming material from the unused scrap. The little card peg is slightly too thick, and so I sliced it in half, and I also carefully cut the upper surface away from the stand wherever it was going to touch either the peg that I was making or the main part of the model itself. And this preparation step is very similar to scuffing a metal or resin model when you're gluing the pieces together, because this will help the glue bond with the material of the card rather than the pre-printed outer surface, which might peel away over time. It's always important to glue the piece to the piece rather than the piece to the paint. And it's always important to test fit pieces, and here is no different. So I checked to make sure everything was going to line up, and once I was happy with it, I used PVA glue to attach the stands and my little wedges to make sure they were all secure. And for this I really do recommend PVA glue. It's relatively cheap and easily available in a lot of places, even non-hobby shops. And as a water-based glue, it's going to soak into the card material, forming a strong bond, and as it's a polymer, once it's set, it's going to be quite durable. Just as a last finishing touch, I went over the edges that formed whilst attaching the stands with my black primer again. As this is a card model, it doesn't need a primer, and it certainly doesn't need a varnish, and so we're actually already done and finished. So there we have it. Some people are struggling with this kit simply because it's a material we are not used to using, but just like with going from plastic to a metal model kit or a resin kit, once you know the steps, it's all fairly easy. Just take your time and trust the process. I'd like to compare it to the older Warlord Hanomag because it's actually a really good comparison to make. It's ever so slightly longer and taller, but it's not enough to affect gameplay in the slightest, and the stands are again slightly bigger, still not an issue. This is going to look absolutely fine on the gaming table next to your infantry models and even next to the older Hanomag model. I can't wait for Warlord to release this new version of the Hanomag kit, because it's certainly a very cheap option in comparison to the older one. Although I do know people are complaining about the detail, and I think that the side detail is actually very good. It's pre-coloured, of course, like we've mentioned before, and there's also stowage and unit markings already printed on. The front and rear are certainly not as nice as the older plastic kit, and so I can see why people aren't as happy with it. Overall, it's a lovely model, and it goes together fairly easily once you know the steps of how to use this particular material, and I will definitely be running it the next time I take my Germans to the local tournament. For anyone wondering why I've taken such a long time on this particular model, please check the date that this video was published. I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.